Hey, good afternoon. You're all very, very welcome to our webinar this afternoon. My name is Mark Spence. I'm Chief Executive of Construction Employers Federation, and I'm absolutely delighted 1 week into our new partnership with LiveCosts to welcome you to their first webinar with our members. And with us today is Kieran Brennan, the founder of LiveCosts. And with Kieran, indeed, is one of his existing customers, Mark Grant. And you'll be hearing a lot more from both of them in this webinar. So really the purpose of this is to introduce you to LiveCosts, explain the software and what it does. LiveCosts, as I say, became a CEF partner last week. We're absolutely delighted to have them on board. It seems like a very innovative product, and we feel it would be of interest to a lot of our members. We will explain later in the webinar as well, there are some CEF member exclusive discounts available and support available to you should you wish to pursue an interest in LiveCosts. So as I say, the webinar will run for about 40 minutes. We'll let you get away early today. Kieran's going to do a presentation and a Q&A then with Mark. What I would suggest to those of you listening to the webinars, if you have any questions, if you go to the bottom of your screen, you'll see a button that says Q&A. If you would tap in your questions there, when it gets to the end of the webinar, I will pose those questions for you and see if we can get some answers for you. If everybody's content with that, we are also recording the webinar. That's just to allow you to share with colleagues or people who missed the webinar, so you know that's happening. So with no more ado, I will pass you over to Kieran. Kieran, you're very, very welcome in your first CEF webinar.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks for the introduction. Great to be here. I might just share my screen, and you might just confirm that you can see my screen. Let me see.
That's perfect, Kieran. We can see that.
Yeah. Great stuff. Thanks very much, Mark. Appreciate it. Good afternoon, everyone. Great to be here today. So my name is Kieran Brennan. I'm the CEO, co-founder of LiveCosts.com. And as Mark said, we've just recently signed up with CEF. We signed a partnership on to connect and explore opportunities with the membership base in terms of what LiveCosts has done. So we've got, as a quick agenda for today, what I'm going to work through is we have myself, I have Mark, who's one of our recent customers. He's director of South Coast Building Company. Mark will do his own introduction very, very soon. But why someone not in the direct region? Well, a lot of our customers in the region probably don't want to share as intimately some of the problems that they may be facing pre-LiveCosts, as obviously competitors on the call and stuff like that. But Mark will certainly share some of the experiences he's had, not just with LiveCosts as the product itself, but I suppose implementing technology as a whole and some of the experiences that he would have experienced just recently. So as a quick agenda, we're just going to walk through some quick intros. I'm going to frame up exactly what is LiveCosts. As I said, we'll jump in with Mark, then we'll get a bit of Mark's experience, give you guys a chance then to pop in some questions around some of that. And then, of course, as I said, hang around for the end, because we'll talk about some of the CEF benefits we have should you see something today of interest. So what is LiveCosts? So my background is construction. I've spent pretty much all my career on your side of the table. And when I say your side of the table, running construction companies, we, I suppose, experienced a lot of trying to keep a track on cost and trying to get an understanding of where we are in a project, which projects are profitable, which projects are causing the most problem, which ones are at risk, all the general day-to-day questions that anyone on this call will know so well. And really what we found was we tried to build a system initially just for our own company. We didn't see anything pass it through that. And we first of all said, well, what we're going to have to do is connect everyone, because we have too many people working in silos. Accounts are doing their thing over there. Procurement could be being done by the people on site, for example, or maybe we have procurement in-house. But really, we had too many people working in silos, and it meant we were always working 30, 60 days behind the event. And we discovered that we needed something better. We needed something that talked to the accounting system. That wasn't the accounting system, because at the end of the day, there's certain people in the company that will always have financial responsibility to a project that are not necessarily the same people you want to have in around your accounts package. So therefore, in our opinion, it needed to be an external environment that connected everyone together that's not the company's accounting package, so that we can do general day-to-day cost tracking. So the first step we had is, how are we going to connect everyone together, right? So steps, pull it away from the accounts package, set up permission bases to allow everyone to work in the permission set that makes sense of that particular role. And now we can start collecting data. So what type of data do we want to start collecting? Well, first of all, we had to position where LiveCosts was going to sit. So tons of construction technology on the market. We decided that we're going to do one thing and one thing only, and that's cost. Right? We're going to be best in class at cost. So we positioned ourselves between the estimating package and the final accounts package. So most customers that come to us have got those two systems in place. They're tendering, estimating, quoting in systems, and they're pretty happy with what's going on over that. If you couldn't put the estimate or the tender together, probably not going to be around long enough to care about what's happening. So that system was generally in place. On the account side, that was generally in place too, or we're considering looking at some of the majors in the market. Xero having a lot of wins in the market at the moment. Sage, Quick being around for a long time, QuickBooks, but it didn't really matter to us. We were what we call account agnostic. It doesn't really matter what we connect to, right? But what we do is we take estimating future tense. This is what we think is going to happen on the project, and we then look at accounts. This is what's happened on the project. Generally, we're holding a post-mortem when we're looking at P&Ls from a project perspective on an accounts. And we connect those two systems together to provide what we call a real-time view on those projects. So generally what we do is all the procurement can be managed through LiveCosts, whether POs are being generated through desktop or mobile. We collect that data, we sync that data against the projects, and we just use simple color codes within the project. So this is LiveCosts. We essentially just sync everything in using amber statuses for committed costs, green status is for approved costs, which can be sunk over into accounts, that type of thing. So from a user experience point of view, when you're looking at something in LiveCosts, very, very simple to understand what's going on. If we're tracking from, let's say, materials point of view, if we want to track the proof of deliveries, capture all those delivery tickets, we have that captured on mobile apps. So POs can be generated in mobile apps, receipts can be taken in through mobile apps, and then deliveries can be taken in through mobile apps. So the invoice scanning technology we've built, so we've built this on a piece of what we call machine learning, which allows us to pull data off invoices and then do an automatic reconciliation of purchase order, delivery, invoice, and automate the job costing. So essentially what we do is when an invoice lands into the LiveCosts, we have the ability to read the invoice, look at the cost, and automate that against the project. So basically, as the invoices are coming in, they're basically building up the project budget. So again, if you look on these dashboards, we can start to get an understanding of where our true costs are, what our committed costs are, and we can, of course, break them down into different phase elements of the project. So if we wanted to jump in and look at the construction phase and then start looking at cost codes, again, it's all being automated against the projects as the costs are coming in. If we are a heavy buyer of material, we can set up materials catalogs, and we can actually read the invoice in terms of what the product code says versus what the catalog says, and we can actually start to look at the fluctuation on the line item as well. I.e., we can basically tell if you're being overcharged from materials. Other aspects of cost that we would track would be time. So time can be our own employees, time can be subcontractors who are, let's say, on day rates, for example, and time can be our own plant and equipment. So if we are controlling plant and equipment, all that be managed through LiveCosts as well. And then, of course, any subcontractors, whether they're on fixed price agreements, scheduler rates, whatever the situation might be. And I suppose the value of this is having all of that in one system means that we can generate real-time reports. So because we have all the key data points, we're not missing any of the data points in terms of, okay, well, labor gets tracked over there, or maybe our subbies are being tracked somewhere else. We've got it all connected in one system, meaning that we can spin up real-time reports. And I mean, and the last part of that is to make sure we don't have any duplication of data. So we've created a connection point then between the project and the account system. So any data is then free flowing. So we don't have to manually input any data into any systems anymore. We'll just scan the data straight through, and then that eventually lands on the account side once it's been project costed and approved. In terms of that agenda, what I'm going to just jump in with Mark, because Mark has just gone through this. So rather than me talking about it from my own point of view, thinking it's a great product, we'll ask Mark to sort of share some of his experience, and not just from a LiveCosts perspective, but just in general of how he went about implementing and getting buy-in from across the company and all that type of stuff. So, Mark, would you mind just jumping in, just giving a quick intro to yourself and your company, please?
Certainly. The business began in 2019. Two lads, one a plumber, one a carpenter, a construction business. 18 months ago, nearly 2 years ago, we embarked upon renewable energy market in the UK, which meant that the number of projects we were dealing with simultaneously jumped enormously from probably 3 or 4 to, well, in nearly 2 years, the project number at the moment is 609. And not all of those go through to fruition, and the value of those projects will be anything from £11,000 to £75,000, £80,000. So the challenge we had then was how do we manage our costs And obviously what we wanted to do was manage those in real time, because if there's going to be a problem, you want to know as early as possible there's a problem, so you've got more time to fix it, and you fixed it before it becomes a very big problem. But we were very much at the time with blank sheet of paper almost, very much in terms of financial controls, almost in a dark room. I always like the expression that a marketing director once used. He said, "I know 50% of my marketing budget works. I just don't know which 50%." Well, we didn't probably even have that much knowledge about the costs in our business. So we needed to find something. We had one application, obviously Xero, but that's it. We then started to learn. We wanted something that integrated with Xero. So very simply, I went into Xero and started looking for applications that might do what we wanted. Unfortunately, came up with LiveCosts.
So how was that problem, I suppose? So you had Xero plugged in. Xero's looking after the general day-to-day accounting issues, and then you've obviously got your project costs and Xero. I think if anyone's familiar with Xero, and most accounting packages actually don't do a great job at looking at project costs, because they're looking at them through an accounting lens and not through a construction lens, and generally tends to run into some problems eventually. How was that problem, I suppose? How was that affecting the business, like, not having everything in Xero?
But you weren't sure what costs were being couldn't attribute costs to a particular project. So you didn't know how your costs on your project was going against your budget. You didn't know what material costs were correct or were incorrect. So you'd have to check every single invoice. You weren't sure, because we weren't actually providing purchase orders, what the rules of engagement were with subcontractors in terms of costs. So it was becoming very, very difficult to work out where our money was going and whether we were on budget. And there was huge amounts of management time spent checking and double checking things to find out where money was being lost, disputes with subcontractors over what was agreed and what wasn't agreed. So LiveCosts allowed us to, first and foremost, I think that's a great page to go to, because the first thing we do here is we set up a project, and we've got a template for different construction phases that we have. For example, groundworks. So we'd set up a template. Groundworks would be in there on a construction project, and within groundworks we'd have separate sub phases, which may be materials, subcontractors, labour, or machinery. That would then be given to the project manager or the business manager, and he would be asked, we'd be told, to put a budget against each one of those phases. So that does two things. That concentrates his mind on the real costs of the project. But when we then start creating purchase orders, the purchase orders are created against each individual phase. So we can see as soon as the purchase order is raised, how that budget is performing against that we've created. So we're finding out very, very quickly if a project is on budget or not on budget. We create the purchase orders in LiveCosts. Very simple process. Take your contacts that you've got for your suppliers, for materials, subcontractors, etc., and create a purchase order. So all the business managers now have to create a purchase order against, and have to create it against the project. When the invoice subsequently comes in, there's a very slick way of processing the invoice in LiveCosts. So you can either post it to LiveCosts, or you can drag and drop it into LiveCosts. And there we can see, again, it is a quite impressive document reader that reads the information on the invoice and then places it appropriately into the various fields you've got there in LiveCosts. We can then, once we've gone through that, we can then convert that and post it to Xero, our back office system. And it does that seamlessly. So we've now got the invoice into Xero, but on the way through, we've also posted it against the project. And we can also reconcile it against the purchase order. And so at this stage, it really comes into its own because it'll also read against the catalogue of prices that we've got with the various suppliers. It'll read the, as you'll see there, the various items and tell us immediately whether they're on par with the document that we've agreed with the supplier or whether they're at odds. And then we can go straight back to the supplier and question that. But
when it comes to the overall, when it comes to the consideration point, like I'm intrigued that you went into that key part, because most of our customers do go there, like they just go straight to that automation piece of reconciliation of PO. But when I take a little step back from that, when it comes to the consideration of, okay, I need to get a handle on day-to-day project costs, because that's what I'm hearing here, is that, you know, I just need to get a real handle on what's happening day-to-day. POs will do that, right? POs will do that. And obviously, if I can open up a PO section and get a visual on the whole company, I can see who's ordering what, who's making it on mobiles, much the pain, where has it been delivered. All that data is there for me. What considerations are you making as a director when it comes to implementing software as a whole? We'll take LiveCosts, but what considerations are you making? And did you have any reservations whether this will work or not?
No, I didn't have any reservations about. I didn't have any reservations about whether it would work or not. The challenge, I'm going to be perfectly honest with you, is trying to get other people to embrace it, because people don't like change. They don't like. It's another process. Some of them think it's there to catch them out. Well, to an extent, it was, because we wanted to see who was keeping projects on budget. It's also there to see who is actually ordering a product, why they're ordering a product, what's the rationale behind them ordering that, and what level of scrutiny have they put in, say, for a subcontractor. What agreement is there with that subcontractor? The number of times that we have historically had disputes, well, we thought we were going to be doing this, and this for this price, and we were going to get paid in 7 days. So you end up with a he said, we said situation going on. You create a purchase order, you put the appropriate information in the purchase order and send that to the supplier. Well, as long as it's clear what you've required, there could be no argument. And as long as the invoice comes in and matches up with that purchase order, it gets paid. Otherwise, it doesn't.
Yeah. So you're getting benefits out of the issuing of the PO straight into the subcontractor, and then all the invoices being scanned in against the contract value to give you a clear balance. This is what I agreed to pay. This is how much I paid today, and this is what's left to pay on the contract. Yeah. Yeah.
So we got two again with materials. Either we didn't get the materials, or we did get the materials, or we got the materials, but it's a different price. Straight away, we can challenge that invoice, go back to the supplier, and until such time as that supplier rectifies the invoice, doesn't get paid.
Yeah. Yeah, no, makes a ton of sense. I mean, just getting the visual on that can be the main thing, and just getting a notification. One of the things we used to hate when I was doing this was what we used to call a phantom invoice, the late invoice, whereby, you know, you think we're sort of done on a particular element of a project and then in comes the late. But obviously, one of our thinkings of that particular feature when building that particular feature was to just make sure that I can see clearly through simple color status, amber and green, that if there is an element of that contract still to pay, to show it to me in amber, so I can't close off that phase, that I know if that subby is potentially going to be late with that invoice, it's fine. I can understand that from a cash flow perspective, there's still, in this case, $8,000 to pay on that particular contract.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
What other benefits, Mark, have you been? I mean, is there any areas of the product? What other areas are you getting benefits from?
Well, we're getting buy-in now from everybody that can see the value of it. So everybody in the business who's instructing anybody for materials or resource, it has to complete a purchase order. So that gives us, so we've got purchase orders, invoices, and delivery notes. We've also got the budgets in there, as you can see. So everybody in the business has got access to LiveCosts, and we've got nothing to hide in here. They can see exactly what's going on with each project in real time. So we can now determine very, very quickly if we're going over budget. But from a broader scale, when you've got a lot of different types of measures that we call them, different types of project, we can see very clearly which ones are benefiting us from a time point of view, which ones are taking longest to fulfill because we've got a start date and end date on the projects, but also which one gives us greater margin. So we can then start to concentrate on projects of a type that give us greater margin because we can see it very, very clearly from our costs and from our income.
Yep, got it. So you guys are using the complete section, I suppose, as a way of taking learnings, then getting the data back on which projects are obviously the ones you should focus on, the ones you're making the money on, which ones maybe we need to sharpen up our tendering, our pricing on. They're the ones where you're having trouble on. We're sort of using them learnings, I suppose, to feed back to our estimating team. Makes sense.
And also the business managers can sharpen themselves up on their invoicing for the price of the job, because they can see, historically where margins weren't what they should be going forward, because there's always a tendency for people to price to win the business. Well, we're not really interested in winning business at any cost. We want to win it till it's with a decent margin in it, and gradually the guys are getting their heads around that.
Yeah. Have you guys been able to quantify it all, Mark? Like, I mean, obviously you're talking about the scanning of the invoices being one. Obviously, there's a clear saving there of not having to manually input information into a system. That's a saving of time. The reconciliation against PO and delivery is obviously going to be a saving of time. But have you been able to quantify that into any sort of metric that says, well, if we do it that way, it's going to save us X amount of time versus how we used to do it?
Well, the challenge is there. We didn't know how much time we were spending doing it the wrong way. So finding out how much time we've saved doing it this way is difficult. But certainly we could say that we've got probably now we're saving on the cost of two full-time employees in our accounts department.
Right.
Then we've got the cost of savings on materials, that we're paying the correct price for materials and we're not paying for materials that we haven't received. There's got to be 2 or 3% of turnover, I would have thought.
If I'm going to walk through that, because that's probably a key point. So I might just jump in and show that, because I think it's sort of important to sort of maybe understand how that could potentially work. I'm just going to grab a value from an invoice, and there's a reason I'll do that in a second. So I suppose what's being described there as well is that, I suppose, once the estimate goes live, we have the ability to, I think what Mark was describing at the start there, is have templates in place. So this is how we generally like to structure our projects. That could be cost codes, that could be phases. It's very flexible in terms of how this project can actually be structured. So we can just pull a template together, spin up a project pretty quickly. Once it's set up, then we have the expectations about, putting the budgets against whatever, if they're subcontract packages, if they're, phases, if they're cost codes, it really doesn't matter. But the important part is, if POs are being generated, whether they're on mobile or desktop, is that we have the ability to cost track them on the way out. So if you're on an accounts package, we can put all the suppliers straight in, so there's no duplication of supplier. We can then allocate these against the projects as they're leaving. So if I'm heading out on a project here, I can say this belongs to this code on this particular project, and it's a material cost for reporting purposes. Track to delivery just opens it up in the mobile app, and it means that we can now get confirmation that the delivery has been accepted, or in a call-off situation, before the invoice comes in, what have I actually got on site belong to this? So basically, before I pay any invoice, I have clear sight of what's on the expected order, i.e. the PO, what's being called in terms of what am I getting back from feeding through the mobile app, what am I being charged for here today? If we're using a catalog, i.e. the example might be that I got a quote, I can just say, as per quote, attach the quote. Or if I have any pricing from existing clients, I can actually open up this catalog and it brings me into an existing pricing database, and I can build a PO up that way from there as well, like 10 of them or 8 of them, whatever the case might be. That allows me to build that up there. Or again, we can just use procurement templates, so for ordering the same stuff again and again. The important part is, no matter who it is in the company or where they are, whether mobile or desktop, every time we generate an order, LiveCosts spins me up an order number automatically. A job cost that. So it gives it an amber status and it goes in against, i.e., as Mark described, the phase. If it was groundworks or element of groundworks, we just cost code that straight away as it's leaving. So it's going in against them. It's given that committed cost. We always have a handle over what's happening as it's happening. Again, the delivery side of things would happen from the job itself. So the guys can just pull out their phone, select the supplier that's landed on the project, allocate that against a particular order number. So if it's call off situation, something like this, it'll show me what was on the previous delivery and what's coming in on this delivery. So I can sort of track that in that sense like that. Or if it's just like I have a quote, again, I can just call that in like so. And what happens then, and what ties all this together, and where the time saving is, that we just drop the invoices in here, and LiveCosts will read the data. So it goes looking for all the data, and it basically is built on a piece of technology called machine learning. So it learns itself how to understand the correct structure of a document. So it'll pick up who the supplier is, what the type of invoice it is, and the PO number is the one of interest, because by scanning that off the invoice, it automatically then understands where to associate this. So it'll know that this particular invoice, this cost here, this 40316, belongs to that particular project and that particular element of the project, whatever way you decide to structure that. And then before we send it over to the accounts, it just walks it through this little workflow. So what does the value on the PO match the value on the invoice? Check that. Who raised the PO? That's the value that was on it. Does the value of the invoice match that? Check that. Check for deliveries. And then, as Mark says, then any pricing that's on the invoice can be compared back to the catalog, and we can do a fluctuation check then to make sure that whatever's on this data, whatever's on this price from a product code point of view is not being overcharged. And if we're happy with that, we just press that approval, and that syncs that over into the accounts package from there as well. So again, there's no duplication of data on the account side as well. Appreciate that, Mark. What about the integration into Xero? Was there much buy-in? Some of the conversations I was having with some customers recently is like, accounts people love the accounts package because it's built for accountants, right? And people in administration roles, if they're coming from a financial background, they love their accounts packages and they don't really want to have things integrate into it and that type of thing. Was there any challenges there in terms of your accounts people not wanting to integrate and have data sinking in there automatically? Was there any challenges there?
Well, I don't want to be facetious, but the people in charge of the accounts are actually married to me, so they didn't have a lot of choice there. But I can imagine, I can imagine that certain people would have concerns, but it's a very light touch integration. So you're just taking to set up the integration is very simple. And most of the heavy lifting, to be honest, is done in LiveCosts. You do the purchase orders, delivery notes, and the invoices go into LiveCosts. You then subsequently push the invoices into Xero, and they sit there as if you put them into Xero without going into LiveCosts. You can also interrogate for details of suppliers, which is quite useful. So if we've got all your supplier details in Xero with all the full details, you don't have to put them into LiveCosts. You can just pull them through. And you can also, when you get invoices paid into Xero against a project, you can pull that invoice into very, very quickly and easily into LiveCosts, so it balances off. So it's a very light touch. It's not too invasive, so you can satisfy accountants' concerns there.
Excellent. When it comes to implementing a new system, and just again, take LiveCosts away for a second, but you've just gone through recently, I call it significant change, really. It's the whole way in which costs are being tracked and analyzed and has changed. What advice would you have to any company, I suppose, that's recommending or is considering, probably be a better word, is considering looking at a change in how they track their day-to-day costs?
Well, LiveCosts does exactly what it says on the tin. So if you want to understand what your costs are in real time at any time, this application will do it for you. It's also very useful for in the work environment. People don't have to go into zero to use this. Everything that they'll need to understand about the costs, purchase orders, and the budgets of various projects are all here. So some concerns people might have are, well, it's IT, and IT normally is difficult to integrate, difficult to get people to understand and use. It's disruptive, and it's potentially expensive. Okay. When I first looked at this, I really didn't know, apart from the name and the description, whether LiveCosts was going to fit our business. Again, there was a light touch integration to start with, phoned up, guys talked us through our business and showed us how this could work for our business. There was not a huge exposure and commitment to start with. It was a gradual process of starting to understand how the application could help us. You're not going to learn everything overnight, but there's plenty of support to help you understand. You could actually turn around and say, for no other reason, that you can process your invoices into LiveCosts, apportion those to a project, and it automatically apportion them to your back office system. That's a great advantage. It's just one aspect. That alone is exactly how we started to use the application, and that alone was very useful. We gradually built up into using all the other facets and pulled the full value of the product together.
I mean, that makes a ton of sense. Appreciate that, Mark. I'll talk about maybe just, I'm just going to open up to a couple of questions to see is there any questions out there, and then I will talk about how anyone on the call can potentially test that out in terms of we do have some benefits to CEF members that want to just have a little play around with LiveCosts and see does it work for the business as well. But before I sort of talk about that, I'll open it up to see if there's any questions for either myself or Mark.
Hey, Kieran. Yeah, we do. We've got a few questions have been popped in. First question, just in the order I got them. In respect of the head office overheads costs, how are they identified? And then the second part of that question is, how are they done? Is it on a global contribution basis or an individual project basis? And a third part of the question, how would you factor in really increases in insurance, things that overheads that have risen abnormally over the past few years? Yeah. So starting then just with the cost of head office costs, how do you identify those and how do you allocate those on a global or individual basis?
So this one was like, I suppose, let me take a step back again, go back to designing LiveCosts 101. Few of us in a room, experienced guys have ran businesses, and we're talking about trying to work through all the different workflows. And the one that Mark we walked through there, like, is one very common one that's caused a lot of time and can be a killer in terms of tracking costs. And that's basically the general invoice processing process. And when we looked at that and we went out to like 100 companies, that process was just a replica. Every company almost done it the same. Invoice comes in, gets passed around. Who ordered this? Did we get it delivered? What job does it belong to? Should it get paid? Posted to accounts. It was almost identical, right? So that was an easy process, although it's quite technically challenging in terms of how we scan the invoice in. The process, we just take all away the technology and just map this out on a whiteboard. How do companies process invoices? Was actually very simple for us to build, right? Because every company almost had an identical invoice processing. Overhead was completely different, right? So we had different situations when we went out to different companies. Some companies look at it, the overhead overall overhead cost for last year, and then we have to prorate that across all companies. So, for example, overhead cost is 10%. That goes across all projects as an overhead percentage. Other companies don't like that, right? Other companies want to see overhead on the project and say, well, let's just attribute all overhead costs as they're coming in against each project. So that one was much more difficult, Mark, for us to actually replicate in terms of we couldn't just build like an overhead process because it wouldn't suit all companies. So what we do is we offer options. Right. Some companies will set up an overhead section in LiveCosts and we'll just deploy all overhead costs against that section so we have a track of it. Other companies won't. Other companies will say, no, we need to see this at a project level. So therefore, when I open up any project, what I want to do is I want to be able to basically have an allocation for overhead that won't carry a budget, but it will carry the cost. And therefore, we are capturing all the overhead costs, and we can sync that over. So if they're using something like a Xero or a QuickBooks or a Sage, they carry some different terms and different accounts packages, tracking categories. We can link all them overhead costs to the accounts package would be the main point. So different customers tackle this in different ways. We've had to be strategic in how we manage it on LiveCosts to try and allow people to adapt to that. So there's different methods, and if anyone wants to sort of walk through those different methods, happy to jump on a separate call to show all the different angles on that. But the direct answer is there is no, this is how you do overhead, because we simply couldn't do that.
Okay. And then just a third part of that question was things like insurance, which have gone up in leaps and bounds and maybe do that in a period of weeks or months. How do you factor those unexpected increases into the overheads?
So is this, I mean, is this about an unexpected rise in insurance costs and how that's going to affect the
I
project?
imagine that's the question. Yeah. So you've maybe budgeted 10,000 for insurance and it becomes 20 in the period of a few weeks.
Yeah, I mean, that's out of our control. Like, there's not much LiveCosts can do about that. All like the closest thing that we would have to that is when it's unexpected, okay? And therefore, we're now tracking that there's a line item here on a particular invoice that has an increase on it, and it will flag that as it sees it, okay? So if it's any line item that comes in on a particular invoice, we do collect data on line items, so we can actually track the fluctuation. But if an insurance company pops their price up, yeah, I mean, there's not much we can do with that. Only flag it and alert you. So there is one thing called budget alerts. So if I set an insurance phase here, if I'm sitting on this project and I want to set an overhead cost for insurance costs, right, I can just set an expected budget against that, call it insurance. Now, once it does go over the expected budget, we do set what we call a budget alert, and that notifies the person to say, hey, you understand your insurance costs have now increased from whatever it was, 10 grand to 12 grand, or whatever the case might be.
Okay, good question here asking, hope I'm asking the right question for the folks who typed this one. I'm not entirely sure, but the question is in terms of budgeting, when you set up the budget, how do you factor in directors' decisions around successful tendering? So I think what we're asking here is you may have a set of costs, but you might have a commercial decision to make as well in terms of a tender price.
So so where LiveCosts kicks in generally is when the project goes live. So the project has basically, we've gone live, tender's been won, we understand our costs, we can set up, you know, our PC sum, our prelim, all that type of stuff, and we can allocate. Is it director costs? Is that the question? Is it more about the tracking of those costs?
Yeah, it's the director's decisions on costs. So I think that's and Mark referred to it as well. That's the desire to win, the commercial decision to win.
Sorry, if I could just help on that one. As it's been said, we don't enter a project into LiveCosts until it's kicked off. That's because as far as we're concerned, we want to manage the cost of that project. Acquisition cost, it doesn't go into LiveCosts.
Okay, so all live, perfect. We have another question then. How do you deal with set-off and contra charges against subcontractor suppliers allocated to a project?
Can we put a bit more context on that one?
That's all we've got there. So yeah, I'm guessing you have a subcontractor supplier. You might have some contra charges or set-offs, or there might be some other business going on with that.
Yeah. Okay. So there's changes to the initial contract maybe. Is probably something. So when you issue, let's say this the subcontractor, I'm controlling this here, so it tells me that first of all I can filter this down by the actual subcontractor's name, project, as they could be working on various projects for us at any one time, that type of stuff. And this allows me to say that when I have an agreement in place with a subcontractor, I issue that agreement from LiveCosts. So that it allows me to send a PO and other attachments. And other attachments in the subcontract context would be your payment terms and conditions, the drawings of the job, start dates, whatever it is that makes up a bundle of attachments that goes to the subcontractor. So first of all, we've made a commercial commitment. It tells us who made the commitment, on what date, of what value. If there's any variations to that, I can come in and I can make an edit. Some companies will work it this way and say that now something has changed. and I'm going to add a new line. I'm going to call it VO1 as per attached. And that allows me to set a new attachment to this, which is a variation that happened on site. And there's now 2 grand worth of variations, and it's all detailed in the attachment. And that goes off what we call save and resend. So the subcontractor, every time it happens, will get an update. Now, once we're doing that action, it's making changes to that value. And what LiveCosts does is if there's any changes to the initial agreement, we track what's called a history check. So we can run a history report at any point in time about what happened between me and that subcontractor over a period of time. It'll give me a story. Here's everything that happened. B is it shows the contract value and any changes that was made to it. And every invoice that comes in against that is basically scanned against that contract value. So here I can see on a single line, I can do this on a dashboard view as well, but if I just want to see it on a line item, I can see this is the person, the company that's managing this. This is the subcontractor. This is the project. This is the code and the project that we're allocating the costs against. This is the person's name and the date that it was issued. Here's all links up to all the invoices we received so far. That's the total contract value, and that's what's left on the contract. So we can continue to add lines, if you want to call it a new line item to that, which saves and resends to the subcontractor every time. That's one option. The other option is we can hang a variation off the phase as well and see that if you want to see that slightly different. Some companies like to see that differently, where they can actually track the variation as its own line item, so that they can basically run reports on that. So if I come in here and I wanted to add in a new variation phase, I can do that from there as well. So a couple of different ways to skin that one.
Perfect. Conscious of time, maybe just a last question, maybe to Mark, actually, this one, just with your experience, Mark, in terms of the different roles in your business, who do you think got the most benefit from LiveCosts? Was it the QSs, the admin team, directors, finance department? Who do you feel got the most benefit?
Well, certainly the finance department did benefit because they were pulling their hair out slightly less than they were before, because there was a lot more structure in place in terms of purchase orders, invoices, etc. But the directors obviously have benefited because they own the business and they can see the value and the benefit going to the bottom line. So they're now all fully embraced with the idea.
Super. Listen, Mark, thank you so much for sharing your experience. I know it's valuable to other contractors to hear it from one of their peers. But Kieran, thank you as well. I think that's been really useful introduction for members to LiveCosts. We're going to follow up this webinar with your contact details and a link to the live recording as well. And I know you're happy if anybody wants to pick some questions up with you offline as well. And I would direct
absolutely
to our CEF website. If you go to the About Us page, you'll see our commercial partners there. LiveCosts are there, of course, and details of CEF exclusive member benefits with LiveCosts there, and a link to your landing page, Kieran, where all of it is explained and offers of help and so on as well. So listen, thank you everybody for logging in. I hope you all find that really useful. I certainly did. I've learned a bit more about LiveCosts today, and I'm sure Kieran will be hearing from you again in the not too distant future. But thank you so much for today.
Thanks for the invite, Mark. Appreciate it.
Thank you both. All the best. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.